Okay, so, I don't wanna, I know we were talking about Grandma and Grandpa, and we had talked about how Grandpa had died, and they were in their sixties,
Yeah,
mid and late sixties at that time.
Yeah.
So.
he was 68, she was 64.
And I do know that in my childhood, she talked about him all the time.
Oh God, she loved him, you know.
Mhm.
One day, it's a funny story, because I felt like a real asshole, and I guess I was. We were going through pictures. She had this huge box full of black and white snapshots from their life together, from when they met and when they, got married and whatever. And they did not have wedding pictures because they got married in the rectory of St. Mary's Church in Evanston, because they got married so fast. She used to say he was the only man that she ever knew who got a marriage license in Cook County on a Sunday.
Before you talk about the pictures, you might as well tell the story of how they met.
Well, my dad was a sailor at Great Lakes, 1917, World War I. And my mother had a brother who was a year older than she was. His name was Peter. Your dad's named after him. And
He was older than her?
1 year.
Okay.
And they were in the same boot camp at Great Lakes. And Dad was from Oklahoma. And when they finished their boot camp, they had like a weekend, and then they were going to New York to ship out. And I don't know what Uncle Pete did during the war, but my dad sailed on the USS Louisiana, and they ferried troops from New York to Paris and back and forth. And so they were friends. So my Uncle Pete said to my dad, well, why don't you come home to Evanston with me for the weekend?
It's a lot more interesting than Oklahoma.
Yeah, believe me. Anything is more interesting than Oklahoma. So at any rate, they met on Friday, and there are pictures.
Weren't they set up on a date or something? I mean, a
No.
date with other people, or it was a double?
No,
You said one time it was the two of them and two girls, and
No, all I know is that they met when Sandy was engaged to Sully. She said to Grandma, how do you know when it's the right person? And Grandma said, I can't tell you that, because he looked at me and I looked at him, and we knew. We just knew. So that's how they met, on Friday. And they got married on that following Monday.
so he came home to dinner or something.
He came to spend the weekend with my uncle at my grandma's house on Darrow Avenue in Evanston. And
So they met, and he was going to be shipping out.
Yes.
So they married. They knew, and they married.
they knew when
before
they
he
married,
left.
and then, and they were.
But you said they didn't even like consummate their marriage.
They didn't have time,
It was in the daytime, and he just
Yeah.
grabbed him.
because they had to go to St. Mary's and there's something living in the attic, and I don't care. So they got married, and then he had to ship out, because he had to ship out on Monday, and that's the day they got married. Anyway, we were going through these pictures, and there was a publicity shot of my dad. He was a sheet metal worker at the electric utility company, and he made these cabinets. You see them around to this day, they're still out there. And for electric boxes or whatever, I don't know. So it was a publicity shot, and it was a big kind of picture for the company magazine. And they got this new machine. It's a bending machine. You would take this heavy steel and it would bend it. And he was in his shirt and his bib overalls, his 5 o'clock shadow, and it was posed. He was, drawing a line, whatever. So it was laying on the dining room table. And that was where we had ended up the last time, because I said to her, if you don't know who these people are, I'm throwing these pictures out, because if you don't know, I'm never gonna know, you know. So she stopped dead in the middle of the dining room and looked at that picture. And this is what she said to me. Wasn't he a handsome man? And Grandpa was a really good looking dude. And I said, yeah, he was. And then, stupidly, I said, do you still miss him? She looked at me and she stared right through me. And she said, every day of my life. So then I realized, having never been in love, I didn't understand that, you know. But yeah, every day of my life. Yeah, it was hard for her, you know. And then, in those days, you know, there wasn't any Social Security. They had just started it back in the days, and so there wasn't anything to get, and there weren't any pensions.
So like when a husband, head of the household dies.
There was no income. There was no income. I think he had to retire early. He had a problem. He and Pete had an accident when they got out of the Navy, and Pete got killed and my dad broke his neck. And when he got in his 50s, this gave him a problem. He had a pinched nerve in his neck, and it made his right hand kind of atrophy, and so he couldn't work. And so he had to take a disability, and all he got was $12.12 twice a month.
Oh,
Yeah.
jeez.
Yeah. And
I mean, even back then, that was
nothing. He wouldn't even take it to the bank. He was ashamed of it. Grandma had to take it to the bank, but they needed the money. And so she had, I think after he died, I think she got $187 a month. And it's a funny lady used to live down on the corner, Carrie Newman. She had the Katharine Hepburn shakes, you know, and she always wore her hair in a chignon, and it was blue. She was one of those blue-haired ladies. And her husband was a widow of World War I, as was Grandpa, so there was a pension you could get. And so Carrie got the papers for Mother to fill out to get this widow's pension, which, because any money you could get was important, you know. So I think Mother got something like $50 a month, but the government was kind of stingy. Every time your Social Security went up, your widow's pension went down a like amount. So you always just had,
what the heck?
yeah, the same amount of money. It's the funny story about Carrie. So one time I'm talking to her. I used to cut her grass for her because she took care of her grandson all week long, and then she was only home on the weekend. And she had the shakes when she talked, but she was funny. I'd see her, I'd be riding my bike, and I'd stop and see her, and she'd say, I got out of the car and I saw my friend George was here. And her grandson called Grandma Mrs. Smiley. So at any rate, we were talking about this pension.
She was so happy all the time.
Well, Grandma was a pretty happy lady. She had a nice looking smile. She was, so we were talking about the widow's pension and about how the government would give it to you with one hand and take it away with the other. And she said to me, I thought this was so funny. She said to me one day, yes, she said, I used to get $94 a month. Now I get $4.
Jesus.
And she said, I think if I live much longer, they're going to give me a damn bill. Yeah, she was kind of funny.
It's wild. I don't know how people survived, you know.
They didn't.
They just had to
Jeannie-
depend on family.
Jeannie supported Grandma. She did. And Dorothy and Ray were always trying to get Grandma to give up this house and go live in a home. And Grandma said to me one day, she said, I'm not going to any home. And I didn't get it, because I didn't live here. I didn't understand what was going on. And finally she told me, she said, they think I'm senile, but I'm not. So when they come and they sit here and they talk to me about how I can't afford to pay my real estate taxes, and I should, Jeannie paid the real estate taxes, your dad paid the real estate taxes one time. I used to say to Grandma, you have nothing to worry about, so you worry about real estate taxes, or what you're gonna eat, that's your next thing to worry about. And, but they were trying to force her to give up this property, and because they wanted it for themselves, and what they wanted was, they didn't like you kids, and they wanted you to not be around here. They thought you girls were sluts and your brothers were drug addicts and drug pushers, and they were very judgmental
drug
people.
pushers in my family, but
what's wrong with free love?
it was the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, it's a different time, So at any rate, so Jeannie paid the real estate taxes and paid for the groceries and paid for Grandma's medicine. And see, that was the problem with Uncle Bud. He was living here and he wasn't paying anything. He was not paying anything at all. And so Grandma's going on with me about not having money for the taxes. And so I said, what? How much money does Jeannie give you? And she said, well, between $800 and $1,000 a month. And I said, and what does Bud give you? And she got this shit-eating grin on her face, and she said, well, most of the time he doesn't give me anything. Sometimes he'll give me $25 or $50.
And then Jeannie was giving $800 to $1,000, and we're talking about back in the
60s, 70s, yeah. So
maybe early 80s.
I said,
that's a lot of money.
I said to her, you have to talk to him. They have to talk to each other. They have to come to some resolution about what is fair and equitable to live here. And I said, he's going to have to pay more money. Well, she was shifty and crafty, my mother. Bud came home from work, and he would always lean up against the washing machine, because Grandma and I would always be in the kitchen. And he walked in the door. He leaned up against the washing machine, and she said, Bud, George has something to say to you. She was gone. So I was laughing. I looked at him and I said, I didn't ask for this job, but it looks like I just became your landlord. Now, one of the things I know about people is when people are crooked and they get caught, the first thing they do is cry.
You said this about Jake too, right?
Jake was that crying. Why? Because you got caught, So he started crying. And I said, now hold it. We're not doing the tear thing here. We're talking here. So I told him that he was going to have to pay more money. And I told him he was going to have to talk to her. Now, you have to tell you, she was terrified of him because he'd scream and yell. He threatened to kill her. I mean, he was not on the bus. See, nobody knew that shit that was going on around here. Jeannie would go in her bedroom at night and lock the door, put a chair in front of the door. She was afraid he was going to come in her room. We would have those parties. Remember, Jeannie and I would do all the cooking. We'd have these Christmas parties and stuff. And I'd buy all the liquor and she'd buy the food, and we'd do the cooking and we, put the buffet. And every time we're going to have another party, like we had one for Grandma's birthday every year, there was never any liquor. I had to go buy liquor all over again, because he would take all the liquor out of the cabinet in the kitchen and put it in his room. Because she told me, she said, I hear those bottles hitting the floor, thud, thud. He would drink it all, scotch, gin, vodka, everything. Got to get his fair share. I gotta get my fair share. So I came out here. It was funny, Linda. Honest to God. You know, there's a wooden napkin holder with the IVs on it. It's still in the kitchen. Grandma kept that on the kitchen table. And I'm sitting here on a Sunday and we're talking, and I look in the napkin holder and there's a check. A check made out to Aunt Jeannie for $250 from Uncle Bud. And I said, what is this? Because that was not the amount of money. I told him, I said they had to talk and they had to come to a resolution of what was going to be fair for each of them to pay. And Jeannie said, I have no idea and I'm not asking. Grandma shrugged.
You wanted them to work it out. but
I
they
wanted
didn't
them to work it out. Yeah. So,
Nobody wanted to say anything to him.
no, because he was so temperamental. He really was. I don't know. I think he had Asperger's, but I'm not sure. They didn't know what that was then. So at any rate, so I come out the next week. Now there's another check in there. This one's for $50. Nobody's saying a word. Now Grandma said to me, you have to talk to him, but don't talk to him when I'm around, because you know he upsets me. You know how he gets. I thought, boy, you put me in a pickle here. So the next time I come now, we got 3 checks in the napkin holder. We got $350 or whatever in there. So Uncle Bud would always come in and park himself at the table, and I'm not supposed to say anything in front of her. How am I going to get to the end of this? You know, I believe in the Holy Spirit. I swear to God, I do. So we're sitting at the kitchen table, and I said to myself, sorry, Mom, but here we go. So I took the checks out, and I laid them in front of Uncle Bud, and I said, would you tell me what this is about? I don't understand this. Well, he says, the $250 is what I think I can afford to pay. No way. Heat, light, gas, water, food, laundry, garage, sailboat, pickup truck. $250? You're crazy, you know.
That's right. Now I remember the parking area because I remember his boat being in that
Yeah.
parking area. I forgot all about the sailboat, right?
Yeah, big sailboat, 22 feet long.
I forgot. Yeah.
So, and then he was on 2 bowling leagues. I mean, this guy was living high on the hog. He was getting a pension from the Air Force, and he was working for Uncle Lee, and Uncle Lee gave him a job because he couldn't get a job anywhere else. You know, he was not employable. So at any rate, I said to him, I'm scrambling, and I said, well, I pay $270 a month rent for my apartment on Wellington Avenue. And if you want to go live in my apartment, you can do that. I'm not living in this house with you. I'm not sleeping on the front porch and paying rent here. I'm not doing that. If I'm going to live here, I'm going to have a bedroom. And then it happened. You always wanted to go to Florida. Why don't you go to Florida? I said, you're not helping around here. You're a drain. Just go to Florida. You should have seen the look on his face. He had this weird idea that because he was the oldest surviving boy, that it was his obligation to live here. But not if you're not helping. You know, you should be helping. So he was gone in 2 weeks to Florida. And I think the problem with Dorothy and Bud and their relationship with the rest of the family was the fact that they got spoiled rotten when they were little kids because Grandma and Grandpa's first 2 children died when they were very young. And so they spoiled Dorothy and Bud. And then when the rest of us got born, somehow in that brain, that was like, if you guys hadn't been born, we'd have more stuff. See? And it's all about, they didn't get their fair share of stuff. And I thought something that my dad's sister Mamie said to me once when I was in Oklahoma, that they came up here the year in 1928, the year the twins were born. And Dorothy was sitting on the front stoop of the 2-flat, and she said to them, we can't have nothing no more. We got twins now, you know. very telling, very telling. Dorothy and Jeannie never got along, never got along. Dorothy was a tattletale.
I think we're at a good point to end that session, but you've kind of left off on a direction I want to go next anyway, so,
Anyways, so
okay.
they never got along, and Dorothy was always tattling on Jeannie. She didn't like the girls that she hung around with, and mother should not let her do this and that and whatever. Jeannie was very independent. She would.
Let me take let's do a